Federal agents smashed through the casino doors seconds after Dante Moretti fired Elena Ruiz. Her back struck the brass bar as he ripped away her staff badge and accused her of planting cocaine inside his private wine cellar. Elena had shut every gaming table after 2 champagne trays appeared without order tickets. Now an agent pressed a pistol toward her ribs, while another pulled white packets from bottles bearing her fingerprints. Elena reached for one cork and rolled it under her thumb. "I uncork from the top," she said. This puncture came through the base. Dante froze. The wax had been resealed by someone with access to his private cellar after Elena completed the nightly count. Then every security monitor went black, and steel cuffs closed around Dante's wrists. The cocaine was planted. Dante was trapped, and the cellar footage identifying the real smuggler would erase itself in 8 minutes. A red countdown appeared on the dead monitors before the numbers began falling. Dante lunged toward the security console, but 2 agents forced him against the bar. "That archive is covered by a federal seizure order," the senior agent warned. "Touch it, and you add obstruction. In 8 minutes, you'll be seizing an empty server," Elena said. Malcolm Voss, Dante's silver-haired chief financial officer, stepped through the broken doors with his hands raised. He had served the Moretti family for 27 years and knew every legal weakness in their legitimate casino empire. "Let them work." "Dante," Malcolm said. "The warrant covers beverage shipments across 3 states. Fighting them will cost us the gaming license." Elena stared at him. No agent had mentioned the shipments aloud. Malcolm met her gaze for only a second before turning away. The countdown reached 7 minutes. Elena saw the green light glowing on the drink terminal below the bar. Surveillance could be erased remotely. But every cocktail order printed through a separate service system for tax reporting. She dropped to one knee. An agent grabbed her shoulder. Yet Elena drove her thumb against the terminal's manual audit button. The printer screamed. A ribbon of paper spilled toward the floor, listing every bottle ordered that night. 2 champagne trays, she said, tearing off the final section. "Neither exists on this report. Someone carried those bottles onto my floor without passing through service." The senior agent took the paper. Malcolm moved closer. A waitress with administrator access could delete an order before printing that. "I don't have administrator access." Elena pointed to the authorization line. "But you do." Silence tightened around the bar. Malcolm's name was not printed there. Only an executive identification number appeared. Dante knew whose number it was. For the first time since the agents entered, he stopped fighting the cuffs. Malcolm's expression remained calm. Half the executives use shared terminals during major events. That proves nothing. The countdown dropped below 5 minutes. Dante instructed his security chief to disconnect the archive from the network. But the senior agent blocked the man with an outstretched arm. Federal authority had replaced Dante's power inside his own casino. Elena glanced toward the broken champagne bottle. A thin blue thread clung under the resealed wax. She had seen that thread around cases reserved for the Moretti Foundation's charity auction. Before she could reach it, an agent kicked the glass into a collection tray and sealed everything inside a black container. The cellar monitors flashed white. Images returned for one breath. Malcolm entering the service elevator. An unidentified man pushing champagne cases. Elena running toward the alarm. Then every screen cleared. The countdown vanished. Archive destroyed. An agent announced. Malcolm exhaled as though disappointed. But Elena saw his right hand relax. The senior agent instructed his team to transport Dante to the federal building and detain Elena as a material witness. "She stays where I can see her," Dante said. You fired her. Malcolm reminded him quietly. She no longer belongs inside this building. Elena flinched. Not because Malcolm was right, but because Dante said nothing. A female agent pulled Elena through the kitchen, while another team dragged Dante toward the main entrance. Elena twisted around and shouted. The charity cases used blue sealing thread. Check them before they leave the casino. The kitchen door slammed between them. The woman escort pushed Elena into an unmonitored service corridor, removed the audit receipt from its evidence bag, and folded it into her own pocket. You should have served the champagne, she whispered. Then she reached for the emergency exit, where a black vehicle waited without federal plates. Elena drove her heel into the brake pedal of a loaded dessert cart. The cart shot down the sloped corridor and struck the woman's knees. Her grip loosened. Elena twisted free, seized the audit strip from the woman's pocket, and slapped the wall switch that released the fire partition. A steel panel dropped between them. A shot punched through it as Elena ran toward the laundry bay. She knew every service route in the Belladonna Casino, because for 6 years she had arrived before the first dealer and left after the last bartender. She crawled under a conveyor, tore her wine-red uniform at the shoulder, and emerged beside the loading docks. Genuine federal vans crowded the north entrance. The black vehicle waited at the south ramp with its engine running. That told her the raid was real. But at least one person inside it belonged to Malcolm. She pressed the audit strip flat against her body and disappeared into the delivery traffic. 6 weeks earlier, Elena had been the person no one noticed until something went wrong. At 42, she managed 90 cocktail servers, 3 bars, and a casino floor that could swallow a careless worker whole. Guests remembered her warm brown eyes and the graceful confidence of her full figure. But they rarely remembered that she had redirected a choking customer to an emergency nurse, caught a dealer skimming chips by watching his drink rotation, and prevented a drunken senator from signing a napkin that contained more than a dinner reservation. Dante remembered the results. He did not always remember the woman who produced them. Every evening, Elena placed a handwritten seller count below the computerized inventory because her father had taught her that machines preserved whatever powerful people told them to preserve. Mateo Ruiz had once owned a small restaurant near the old train station. A partner hid narcotics inside his wine delivery. And by the time the truth emerged, Mateo's name, health, and business were gone. Elena had been 19. She had never forgotten the sight of strangers carrying chairs out of the dining room while her father stood behind an empty register. That memory created the one rule she taught every server: if a bottle, tray, or guest appeared outside the system, stop and verify. Revenue could be recovered. A person could not. Her other rule was more private. Any employee who felt threatened could write "no citrus" on an order ticket. Elena would remove them from the floor without questions and investigate later. Dante had approved the code after Elena quietly saved a young hostess from an abusive high roller, though he had signed the policy without asking who designed it. Dante Moretti, 45, was tall, broad-shouldered, and controlled enough to frighten people without raising his voice. His family's criminal power had built the Belladonna decades ago. But Dante spent years separating the casino from the smuggling routes that had funded it. He still ruled the Moretti organization, and men who betrayed him rarely received a second chance. Yet he wanted the Belladonna to survive daylight. A clean gaming license, a legal beverage distribution network, and the coming Foundation Gala were meant to prove he could turn inherited power into something that did not poison every person near it. His flaw was hidden inside that ambition. Dante trusted systems, seniority, and men who had served his father 16 years earlier. A frightened warehouse clerk had warned Carlo Moretti about a traitor. The warning was false. The resulting retaliation killed an innocent captain, and the real enemy used the confusion to murder Carlo 2 weeks later. Dante learned the wrong lesson. He decided that unverified warnings from frightened employees created chaos, while established authority created safety. Malcolm Voss had helped him build that belief. Malcolm had been Carlo's financial advisor, executor, and closest friend. He taught Dante how to read a balance sheet, how to hide fear during a negotiation, and how to distinguish loyalty from affection. By the time Elena began noticing irregularities in the charity wine, Malcolm's signature could open every office Dante owned. The first anomaly seemed harmless. A case of vintage champagne assigned to the foundation auction weighed almost 2 pounds more than the matching case beside it. Elena asked the cellar clerk whether packing material had changed. He opened one box in front of her. The bottles appeared untouched, each neck wrapped with pale blue sealing thread and stamped with the foundation crest. Elena weighed a single bottle, then another. The difference was less than an ounce. She accepted the explanation until she saw a shallow needle mark under the wax on one cork. It disappeared when she rubbed the wax warm. She took the bottle to Malcolm because the charity inventory fell under his office. He listened with patient concern and promised a vendor inspection. The next morning, the bottle was gone. The digital weight record had been corrected, and Elena received a written warning for entering an executive cellar without permission. She tried to reach Dante. His assistant told her he was negotiating with the Nevada gaming commissioners and the bank financing the Belladonna's waterfront expansion. Canceling the gala or admitting a security problem could trigger a morality clause. Freeze the loan and hand interim corporate authority to the chief financial officer. Elena understood why Dante could not be interrupted for every inventory error. She also understood that Malcolm had drafted the clause. Over the next month, minor discrepancies multiplied. An executive access number opened the cellar after midnight. Delivery manifests listed cases that never reached the service floor. A new beverage contractor called Argent Logistics replaced a company that had worked with the Belladonna for 14 years. When Elena asked why, Malcolm said the old contractor failed a background review. She called its owner and learned Malcolm had terminated the agreement before any review occurred. Elena printed the call log and placed it in Dante's private message box. The paper returned to her desk inside an envelope stamped, "Staff matter referred to finance." Malcolm summoned her that afternoon. He did not threaten her. That made the conversation worse. He poured tea, asked after her widowed mother, and mentioned that Rosa Ruiz's apartment lease was held by a Moretti property company. "You work harder than anyone here," he said. "Hard workers sometimes mistake proximity for authority." Elena put down the untouched cup. "And powerful men sometimes mistake silence for loyalty." Malcolm smiled. "Then let us hope neither of us is mistaken." Elena left, knowing a simple warning would not reach Dante safely. She began keeping duplicate counts in the lining of her server ledger. She photographed corks beside time-stamped guest receipts. She tested innocent explanations before accusing anyone. Condensation could alter weight. Wax could crack during shipping. Shared executive numbers could appear on terminals. But innocent explanations stopped working when she saw the female federal agent who would later escort her meeting Malcolm in a private parking bay. The woman wore civilian clothes and accepted a thick envelope from him. Elena caught only one sentence through the half-open service door. "The warrant goes live when he loses the floor." Malcolm closed the door before she heard more. On the night of the raid, the casino glittered for a private rehearsal of the Foundation Gala. Bankers, gaming officials, and donors filled the high-limit rooms while Dante hosted a closed dinner upstairs. Elena counted the auction bottles twice. All were present. At 11:40, two servers she did not recognize emerged from the executive elevator, carrying champagne trays without tickets. Each bottle wore the Foundation's blue thread. Elena blocked their path. One man abandoned his tray and ran. The other shoved Elena into a table. She caught a bottle before it shattered and saw white powder clinging inside the hollowed base. She pressed the emergency floor switch. Music stopped. Gaming tables locked. Security shutters divided the casino into zones. The action protected hundreds of guests and prevented the unknown servers from leaving. But it also gave Malcolm exactly what he needed, a visible act that appeared to coordinate with the coming raid. His security team found Elena beside the abandoned tray. Her fingerprints covered bottles she had inspected earlier. Her access card showed 3 midnight entries into the cellar. Malcolm presented Dante with a bank alert claiming $250,000 had entered Rosa Ruiz's account from Argent Logistics. Dante came down from dinner, carrying the cold fury of a man whose deepest fear had just been confirmed. Elena tried to show him the missing order tickets. Malcolm showed him a cropped security image of her meeting the old beverage contractor behind the casino. She had met the man to verify why his company was dismissed, without sound. It resembled a secret exchange. "Give me 10 minutes." Elena pleaded. "Check the bottom of the corks." Dante saw packets. Forged access records. Money connected to her mother. And a woman he had trusted standing at the center of it all. He chose authority over the person in front of him. He tore away her badge. Seconds later, federal agents smashed through the doors. Bidan. Elena reached the abandoned restaurant her father once owned. The Moretti company had purchased the building after Matteo died but never redeveloped it. And Elena still carried an old key. Dust covered the tables. The faded words, "Ruiz Family Kitchen," remained above the counter. Her shoulder burned where the false agent had twisted it, and a bullet had grazed the skin along her upper arm. But the wound was shallow. She washed it, wrapped it with a clean dish towel, and laid the audit strip under a cracked desk lamp. The receipt proved no legitimate order produced the champagne trays. It did not prove who had carried them, or who placed the cocaine inside. She called her mother from a prepaid phone. Rosa answered in tears. Federal officers had searched her apartment and seized her bank records. The $250,000 deposit existed, but Rosa had never seen it. The account was an old trust Elena opened to cover future care. Malcolm's finance office managed the trust. Elena instructed her mother to stay with a cousin and reveal nothing about the restaurant. Then she called Dante's private number. A federal attorney answered. 10 minutes later, Dante came on the line from an interview room. His voice sounded exhausted rather than angry. "Where are you?" "One of the agents tried to take me to an unmarked vehicle. You assaulted a federal officer and fled." She stole the audit receipt from the official bag. Elena forced herself to breathe slowly. Malcolm knew the warrant covered interstate shipments before the agent said it. "He controls my mother's trust." He had access to the cellar and the service terminals. Dante remained silent long enough for hope to become painful. "Come in," he said at last. "If you are innocent, the records will show it." Elena stared at the receipt in her hand. "The records disappeared while you were watching. Running makes every accusation stronger. And surrendering puts me back with the woman who tried to remove me. I can protect you." Elena almost laughed. He had fired her, allowed Malcolm to separate them. and now spoke as if protection were something he could declare into existence. "You had that chance." She ended the call. Across the city, Dante held the dead phone while Malcolm sat outside the interview room arranging his release. The planted packet supported a federal narcotics warrant. But the Belladonna's corporate attorneys proved Dante had been at a public dinner during the cellar deliveries. He left on restricted travel with the casino license temporarily suspended. Elena remained the easiest suspect. Malcolm issued a statement calling her a trusted employee who had exploited the Moretti family's generosity. News channels repeated footage of Dante ripping away her badge. Her face appeared beside the words, "Fugitive Waitress." The public humiliation spread faster than any correction could travel. That evening, 3 men entered the old restaurant through the kitchen. Elena heard the scrape of a shoe before the lock turned. She killed the lamp and moved behind the counter. The intruders carried no federal identification. One whispered that Malcolm wanted the paper before they burned the building. Elena's fear sharpened into purpose. She knew the old kitchen better than they did. She opened the gas valve below the cold stove, waited until the sharp odor crossed the room, then threw a metal pan through the front window. The men flinched and covered their faces, expecting an explosion. Elena never lit a flame. She used their hesitation to drop through the flower hatch into the basement. One man caught her injured arm at the bottom of the stairs. Pain blinded her, but Elena slammed the heavy cellar door onto his hand and locked it with a sliding bolt. She escaped through the coal passage behind the building as smoke rose from an office fire the others had started. She saved the receipt, but lost her phone and the duplicate cellar counts hidden upstairs. From an alley, she watched the restaurant burn. Fire crews arrived too late to preserve the office. Malcolm had erased the place where her father's name was last visible. Elena did not cry until the sign collapsed. Then she pressed the audit strip inside her coat and walked away before the police sealed the street. The Belladonna reopened under emergency management 48 hours later. Malcolm became interim chief executive because the bank covenant required an approved officer while Dante faced investigation. He presented the appointment as a sacrifice. Dante watched from the private mezzanine as Malcolm accepted condolences from employees whose schedules he had already cut. Without Elena, small failures spread across the floor. Servers missed private signals. A frightened hostess wrote "no citrus" on her ticket. But the new supervisor sent the drink anyway. Dante saw the woman recoil when a guest grabbed her wrist. He crossed the room, removed the guest, and asked who had failed to act. The supervisor admitted he had never been taught Elena's code. Dante found the policy bearing his own signature. Elena's name did not appear anywhere. It was the first personal contradiction. The woman accused of using vulnerable employees as cover had quietly built a system to protect them, then declined credit for it. That did not prove innocence, but it made Malcolm's description of her selfishness harder to accept. Dante visited Rosa Ruiz's frozen bank account. The deposit from Argent Logistics had arrived 14 minutes after Elena shut the casino, though the federal affidavit described it as advance payment. Malcolm explained it as a delayed transfer. Dante requested the original bank instruction. Malcolm said federal agents had seized it. That answer created the second contradiction. If Elena had been paid in advance, why was the money initiated after her protective action? Dante examined the recovered cork photographs. The punctures entered from below, just as Elena said. Laboratory residue showed adhesive used by Belladonna's executive packaging department, an area Elena could not enter with her staff badge. Her access log claimed she had entered that department twice. On both occasions, payroll cameras placed her serving guests on the opposite side of the casino. Someone had cloned her credential. Dante's certainty fractured. He tested Malcolm without revealing his doubts during a family council meeting. Dante announced that federal technicians had recovered a backup showing the charity bottles moved through Warehouse C. No backup existed. Malcolm dismissed the claim and advised everyone to let investigators handle it. 3 hours later, Dante's private team watched 2 Argent logistics trucks enter Warehouse C. Men removed crates and set the building on fire. One driver escaped. The other was caught carrying a phone containing Malcolm's direct office number, though the messages themselves had been erased. That was the adversarial contradiction. Malcolm had acted on information shared only in the council room. Dante now possessed suspicion, technical inconsistency, and proof that his oldest advisor was hiding access. He still lacked the connection between Malcolm, the planted narcotics, and the succession clause. More painfully, he lacked Elena. Dante returned to the ruined restaurant before sunrise. Fire had gutted the dining room, but the basement survived. He found a man's broken watch beside the cellar door and a smear of blood on the bolt. Elena had fought her way out. Near the coal passage, he discovered a scorched cocktail napkin wrapped around a small piece of blue sealing thread. On the napkin, Elena had written 2 words in pencil: "No citrus." It was not a plea meant for him. It was an instruction to anyone loyal enough to understand. Dante carried the napkin to the Belladonna and asked every remaining server what Elena did when that phrase appeared. "A young bartender," said Elena, took endangered employees to a women's shelter run from a closed roadside motel outside Henderson. Dante went alone. He left his armed escort behind because arriving with Moretti soldiers would confirm every reason Elena had to distrust him. The motel sign had lost 3 letters, and desert wind pushed sand across the empty pool. Dante knocked once on room 7. The door opened 2 inches before a tire iron struck the frame beside his head. Elena stood behind it with her injured arm bound against her ribs. Exhaustion darkened the skin below her eyes, but her hand remained steady. "You found the code," she said. "I found what you built while I was too important to notice who built it." Dante set his pistol on the walkway and stepped back from it. He showed her the scorched napkin, the laboratory report on the adhesive, and photographs of the trucks burning Warehouse C. "The deposit reached your mother after the shutdown. Your badge was used while you were visible on the gaming floor. Malcolm sent men to a warehouse because I lied about what was inside. Elena did not lower the tire iron. That proves he is hiding something. It does not prove I helped you. No, it proves I was wrong." The words cost him more than a threat ever had, because no explanation could soften them. "I fired you in front of your staff. I let Malcolm turn your judgment into guilt. Then I asked you to trust the system that was hunting you. I have no excuse." Elena's grip loosened by a fraction. "An apology is not a plan." "Then tell me the plan." She studied him, searching for the command hidden inside the offer. She found none. Only then did she let him enter. The room contained bottled water, a first aid kit, and photographs spread across the bed. Elena had enlarged the auction labels from pictures taken at rehearsal. Every original foundation bottle carried thread, twisted clockwise. The 2 trays from the raid used thread, twisted counterclockwise. Both came from the same manufacturer, but different production batches. Argent bought the second batch. Elena said, "I called the manufacturer before my phone disappeared. They would not send the invoice without a subpoena." Dante placed an Argent ownership chart beside the photographs. His attorneys had traced the company through layers of holding firms to Halcyon Capital, the lender waiting to seize the Belladonna's waterfront distribution concession if the foundation gala failed. Malcolm's private trust owned Halcyon, The objective became visible. Malcolm did not merely want Dante arrested. He wanted the raid to activate the emergency clause, install himself as chief executive, and acquire the port concession through a company he secretly controlled. Once Argent became the Belladonna's official distributor, sealed beverage containers could move through casinos and hotels without repeated inspection. The cocaine in Dante's cellar created both the crisis and the false justification for Malcolm's new security regime. Why risk placing product here before he owns the route? Dante asked. Elena tapped the photographs. Because the federal warrant had to exist before the board could replace you. He needed enough real cocaine to make the raid legitimate and enough false records to choose who they blamed. She handed him the rescued audit strip. The woman escort stole this from an evidence bag. She knew the bottles bypassed service. Dante recognized her from raid footage supplied by federal counsel. Special Agent Mara Keene had written the affidavit connecting Elena to Argent. Malcolm had purchased privileged access inside the task force. The gala was 4 nights away. Canceling it would cause the foundation bond to default at midnight. Transferring the waterfront concession to Halcyon. Holding it would bring the bank trustees, state commissioners, federal observers, and Moretti Council into one ballroom, exactly where Malcolm planned to formalize his authority. It was also the only place where Dante and Elena could make every audience see the truth at once. Private proof would disappear through compromised hands. A public chain of custody would be harder to erase. We let the gala continue, Elena said. Dante started to object, then stopped himself. He had asked for her plan. What do you need access to the independent tax archive? The original auction cases, and someone inside the federal team who is not owned. Dante knew the senior agent who had prevented him from touching the server. Jonah Price had refused 3 separate requests from Malcolm to expand the warrant into the guest hotel. The refusal suggested limits rather than loyalty, which was all they could safely assume. Dante contacted Price through his attorney and offered the audit receipt without revealing Elena's location. Price agreed to verify it, only if the original remained untouched. Elena placed the strip inside a clear sleeve, signed across the seal, and made 3 continuous photographs showing the serial number and time. It was not formal custody yet, but it prevented an easy substitution. Dante watched her work. You learned this from your father. I learned what happens when no one protects the first honest record. Her voice hardened. Malcolm burned his restaurant. Dante's jaw tightened. I will rebuild it. Do not buy forgiveness with a building. Elena faced him. Help me stop the man. After that, I decide what anything is worth. Dante accepted the boundary. Respect entered the room where possession would once have stood. They reached the Belladonna's tax archive through a drainage access under the old convention wing. Dante had designed the passage as an escape route years earlier. Elena knew where the laundry staff hid the key because she had once evacuated them during a kitchen fire. Neither could have entered alone. Inside, shelves held duplicate point-of-sale rolls required by state auditors. Malcolm could alter the casino network, but destroying 7 years of paper during an active investigation would draw attention. Elena located the rehearsal date and compared the bartender totals with her rescued strip. The sequence numbers connected perfectly until 2 missing transactions appeared at 11:38. They had been voided under Malcolm's executive code. A carbon copy retained the pressure marks, even though the printed ink had been removed. Dante photographed the indentations under sidelight. They showed 2 champagne orders assigned to Table 12, where the state gaming commissioner and lead bank trustee were scheduled to sit during the gala. The bottles had not been random hiding places. They were meant to reach the two people capable of delaying Malcolm's transfer. Cocaine planted in the cellar created the raid. A separate substance inside the gala bottles would remove opposition after Malcolm took authority. Elena found the matching dispatch stub. Argent Logistics had delivered the bottles, and Malcolm's office had signed the exception, allowing them to bypass inspection. That connected him to access. But the signature was digital, and he could claim an assistant used his code. They still needed proof of knowing participation. A door slammed in the archive. Malcolm's security chief entered with two men. Dante shoved Elena behind a shelf as a bullet tore through the paper boxes. He reached for his pistol, but Elena caught his wrist. Firing would reveal their position. She pointed to the overhead sprinkler pipe and the red maintenance wheel beside it, while Dante drew the men down one aisle. Elena opened the wheel. Cold water exploded across the archive. Paper swelled. Shelves became slick, and the emergency doors released. One attacker slipped. Dante disarmed him. Elena pushed a rolling ladder into the second man and escaped through the fire door with the original carbon sheet sealed inside her coat. They lost several archives to water, but the box they needed remained intact. Outside, Dante's sleeve was cut, and Elena's injured shoulder had reopened. He tried to examine it. She stepped away. Safe first. He nodded and followed her rather than arguing. That small obedience changed something, neither named. Agent Price met them inside a church parking garage chosen by Elena. He arrived without a task force vehicle and kept both hands visible. Elena described Mara Keene taking the audit strip and trying to force her into the black vehicle. Price did not ask why Elena fled. He asked which hand Keene used to remove the receipt, what direction the vehicle faced, and whether its windows carried a Federal Fleet sticker. The precision reassured her. Price accepted the sealed strip, signed the transfer line, and gave Elena a copy. He also revealed that Keene had requested the raid 7 days before the confidential informant supposedly identified Elena. That impossible date established advance intent. Internal investigators could retrieve Keene's communications. But Price warned that an arrest would alert Malcolm and force him to destroy whatever remained. They needed him to act. Dante supplied controlled information. In Malcolm's presence, he told the family council that the original Argent authorization had survived on a portable audit drive. He claimed the drive would be hidden inside the silver base of the centerpiece at the Foundation Gala, where a state trustee would accept it during the auction. No such drive existed. Only Malcolm, 2 loyal attorneys, and Agent Price heard the location. Price placed independent cameras on the centerpiece and assigned internal investigators as catering inspectors. Elena created a second safeguard. She marked every legitimate auction bottle with a drop of clear food-safe dye that turned violet beneath the service lamps. The mark sat under the base, invisible to guests, but obvious to trained servers. If Malcolm replaced a case, Elena's staff could identify it without relying on computers. She called 3 supervisors who still trusted her and explained only what they needed. Any unmarked bottle would trigger the phrase, "no citrus." No one would confront a suspect. They would redirect guests, lock service carts, and preserve the item in public view. Elena's quiet system became the backbone of Dante's counterattack. For 2 days they worked from separate rooms at the shelter. Dante handled the board, attorneys, and federal liaison. Elena mapped service corridors, assigned bottle checks, and reconstructed the raid minute by minute. Their conversations changed as command gave way to cooperation. He stopped telling her what protection he would provide and began asking where his people should stand. She stopped assuming every silence meant disbelief. Late on the second night, pain made her drop a stack of diagrams. Dante knelt to gather them, but did not touch her injured arm. "May I?" he asked, holding the bandage. Elena hesitated, then nodded. He cleaned the reopened graze with careful hands. The intimacy mattered because a man accustomed to taking permission had waited for hers. "My father trusted Malcolm more than he trusted his own sons," Dante said. "After Carlo died, Malcolm became the voice that told me certainty was strength." Elena watched him secure the bandage. "Certainty feels strong because it does not require listening. I listened too late. Then listen on time at the gala." Dante met her eyes. "Even if your plan costs me the casino, especially then." He finished the bandage and moved away. Elena realized she wanted him closer, which angered her because wanting was easier than trusting. She returned to the diagrams. Dante did not press. The Belladonna Foundation gala opened under chandeliers shaped like falling stars. News crews crowded the entrance. State officials occupied the front tables. Federal observers stood along the walls. And members of the Moretti Council gathered beside the stage to vote on permanent leadership. Malcolm wore a white dinner jacket and the calm expression of a man already celebrating. Dante arrived under travel restriction, dressed in black. With no visible escort, he had agreed to Malcolm's demand that he publicly separate himself from Elena before the board considered restoring his authority. Cameras turned when he approached the microphone. "The employee responsible for shutting this casino acted without my authorization," Dante said. The sentence cut Elena even though she had approved it. She watched from the service station in a plain black uniform, her hair pinned under a catering cap. Dante continued, "I will accept the board's judgment regarding every failure that occurred under my command." Malcolm heard surrender. Elena heard the precise limit. Dante had not called her guilty. The performance drew Malcolm toward the trap. Within minutes, one of his assistants entered the ballroom storage room and removed the silver centerpiece base named in Dante's false disclosure. Independent cameras captured the assistant handing it to Mara Keene near the executive elevator. Keene opened it, found nothing, and called Malcolm. Price's investigators recorded the call, but Malcolm spoke carefully. "Then proceed with the secondary arrangement," he said. The words proved coordination, not the crime itself. Malcolm had anticipated a trap. The secondary arrangement began when 3 replacement champagne cases arrived through the East Kitchen. Their bases carried no violet dye. Elena's supervisor wrote "No Citrus" across a service ticket. Servers quietly delayed the front tables while Elena followed the cart. Mara Keene stepped from the elevator and displayed her badge. "Elena Ruiz, you are under arrest for interstate narcotics distribution and assaulting a federal officer." Every camera in the ballroom swung toward them. Malcolm had chosen public humiliation as his defense. If Elena ran, she confirmed the fugitive's story. If she surrendered to Keene, the bottles would reach table 12. Elena raised her hands. "I will comply after you identify the case you removed from federal custody during the raid." Keene seized her injured arm. Elena's knees nearly folded, but she kept her voice level. "Your warrant was requested before the informant named me. Agent Price has the date." Keene's face changed for less than a second. Then she dragged Elena toward the ballroom and announced that the fugitive had tried to sabotage the gala. Malcolm approached the stage with the Moretti board behind him. He called for the final vote. At the same moment, unmarked bottles rolled toward the commissioner and bank trustee. Elena caught the eye of a server and touched 2 fingers to her wrist. The signal to lock the cart. The young woman obeyed. A concealed latch closed around the rear wheel. The cart stopped 6 feet from table 12. Malcolm adapted immediately. He blamed the jam on Elena, instructed security to clear the aisle, and asked the board to vote before another disruption endangered the guests. The tally gave him temporary corporate authority. He produced an emergency transfer agreement assigning the waterfront concession to Halcyon Capital and placed it before Dante. Refusal would trigger bankruptcy under the bond covenant. Signing would hand Malcolm the route he had built the entire conspiracy to obtain. Dante lifted the pen. Elena stood in Keen's grip. Surrounded by cameras and hostile faces, for one terrible second, she wondered whether the public rejection had been real after all. Dante signed only his first name, then laid down the pen. A transfer made under a criminal conspiracy is not enforceable, he said. Malcolm smiled. You have offered accusations for weeks. The federal case names your waitress. Not me. Then let her speak. She has no standing here. Dante turned toward the cameras. Elena Ruiz has more standing than any man who ignored her. He walked off the stage, crossed the ballroom, and stopped in front of Keen. Release her. Keen tightened the cuff. Interfere, and I arrest you. Agent Price emerged from the catering inspectors with 2 internal investigators. Mara Keen. Step away from the witness. Keen reached inside her jacket. Elena stamped hard on Keen's instep, rotated her trapped wrist through the loosened cuff, and pulled herself behind the locked champagne cart. She did not wait for Dante to rescue her. Price's team disarmed Keen before she reached her weapon. Guests surged from their seats. Malcolm remained beside the transfer document, calculating which proof he could still survive. Elena climbed onto the low stage, carrying one of the replacement bottles. Malcolm is right about one thing, she said. An accusation is not enough. She placed the bottle beside an original auction bottle and switched on a portable service lamp. Violet dye appeared beneath only one base. She cut both wax seals. The original thread twisted clockwise. The replacement twisted counterclockwise. These batches came from different buyers. The Foundation purchased the first. Argent Logistics purchased the second. Malcolm spread his hands. A server could replace thread. She managed the entire beverage floor. Elena rolled the replacement cork under the magnifying camera used for auction jewelry. A crescent puncture appeared through its base. A server opens from the top. Argent's injection machine enters from below. She displayed the manufacturer's invoice, authenticated by Agent Price and the state trustee. Malcolm replied that Argent was an approved contractor and any employee could misuse its equipment. His rebuttal was credible enough to quiet the room. Elena had expected it. Dante handed Price the carbon dispatch sheet from the Independent Tax Archive. The pressure marks showed Malcolm's executive code voiding the 2 orders assigned to Table 12. Again, Malcolm argued that executives shared terminals. Then Price played the timeline from Keen's recovered phone. Her warrant request preceded the informant report. Calls placed her in contact with Malcolm's private line before and after the raid. Still, Malcolm did not confess or panic. A chief financial officer speaks with federal agents during an investigation. He said, "None of this proves I knew narcotics were inside those bottles." Elena nodded. "That is why Dante told you the audit drive was hidden in the centerpiece." Independent footage appeared on every ballroom screen. Malcolm's assistant removed the silver base. Keen opened it. Her call reached Malcolm. His instruction to begin the secondary arrangement played aloud. Next came loading dock footage of the replacement cases arriving moments later under an Argent authorization signed from Malcolm's secured tablet. The tablet required his fingerprint and a rotating code delivered to the watch on his wrist. Malcolm glanced down at that watch. It was the first uncontrolled movement he made all night. "You still need to prove what was inside," Malcolm said. Elena did not touch the replacement bottle again. Price's technicians opened it inside a clear containment box. The liquid held a concentrated sedative capable of disabling the commissioner and trustee without leaving the white powder that had triggered the original raid. A trace of the same packaging adhesive found inside the cocaine corks lined the injected base. The two operations came from one process. The state trustee produced the last document, Halcyon's original ownership declaration, obtained after Dante voluntarily waived the Moretti Trust's financial secrecy. It showed Malcolm as beneficial owner. The declaration established his objective. The invoice and dispatch sheet established access. The controlled centerpiece, lie, and secondary shipment established knowing action. Separate sources formed a chain he could no longer dismiss as Elena's manipulation. Malcolm's face did not collapse. He activated his contingency. Every ballroom light died. Fire shutters dropped over the main doors, and smoke hissed from vents near the stage. His remaining security men overturned the champagne cart and rushed toward the trustee's documents. Guests screamed. Malcolm moved for the executive elevator while Keene struck one investigator and ran after him. The darkness had been prepared to create confusion, destroy the proof, and leave Elena blamed for another shutdown. Elena smelled the smoke and recognized theatrical glycol used by the casino's stage crew. "It is not fire," she shouted. Panic swallowed her words. She climbed onto a table, struck a spoon against a champagne bucket, and called the phrase every server knew. "No citrus north route." Cocktail staff repeated it from table to table. The code transformed fear into movement. Servers lit their handheld lamps, unlocked the service panels, and guided guests through the kitchen exits that Malcolm's men had overlooked. Dante could have chased Malcolm. Instead, he followed Elena's instruction and helped clear the commissioner's table. Sacrificing the chance at revenge to protect people his empire had endangered. When the last elderly donor crossed the service threshold, Elena saw Keene dragging the state trustee toward the elevator as leverage. Elena rolled an empty service cart down the polished aisle. It struck Keene's legs and broke her grip. The trustee fell behind a table. Keene raised her weapon toward Elena. Dante hit the emergency spotlight from the stage. White light blinded Keene long enough for Price to tackle her. Elena had saved herself and the witness with the same ordinary equipment Malcolm believed belonged to invisible workers. At the elevator, Malcolm found his access code disabled. Dante had surrendered his corporate authority to the state trustee seconds before the blackout, preventing Malcolm's new title from opening executive systems. Malcolm turned and drew a small pistol. He aimed at Elena. "Not Dante. A waitress," he said with quiet disgust. "You destroyed 30 years of work." Elena stood beside the locked cart, breathing hard. "No, I noticed it." Malcolm fired. Dante pulled Elena behind the marble bar as the shot shattered a bottle above them. Price fired into the ceiling beam beside Malcolm, forcing him to drop the weapon rather than killing him. Internal investigators closed around him. He offered no confession. He simply watched the servers carrying guests to safety and understood that the people he never counted had defeated him. The ballroom lights returned 12 minutes later. Cameras captured Malcolm in restraints, Keene under federal arrest, and Elena standing beside the unserved bottles from table 12. Dante could have allowed the images to become another story about a powerful man surviving betrayal. Instead, he returned to the microphone while federal technicians secured the exhibits. 6 weeks ago, Elena Ruiz warned my organization about a breach. He said, "My chief financial officer buried her warning. I trusted his position over her work. Tonight she preserved the records, exposed the root, protected our guests, and prevented 2 attempted murders. I fired her publicly. I accused her without hearing her publicly. I will correct that harm publicly." He displayed the full security sequence recovered from an off-site maintenance cache Price had located through the service terminal's manufacturer. It showed Elena stopping the unordered trays and Malcolm's assistant entering the cellar. Dante then released the original bank instruction, proving Malcolm's trust office initiated the deposit to Rosa after the shutdown. News networks that had labeled Elena a fugitive carried the correction live. Dante did more. He surrendered the Moretti organization's historic freight ledgers to federal prosecutors, including routes that could expose crimes committed under his own leadership. The disclosure cost him allies, money, and the protection of silence. It also removed the leverage future men like Malcolm could use to preserve the criminal network hidden below the casino. Dante did not ask Elena to praise the sacrifice. Repair was not a gift to her. It was the price of becoming a man whose apology meant anything. Malcolm Voss was indicted for conspiracy, attempted murder, narcotics distribution, financial fraud, and obstruction. Mara Keene faced federal charges, and the task force reopened every case touched by her affidavits. Argent Logistics lost its licenses. Halcyon Capital entered receivership, preventing it from claiming the waterfront concession. The Belladonna accepted an independent compliance monitor and paid restitution to employees whose records had been used in Malcolm's scheme. Rosa's account was cleared within a week. Though Elena refused the Moretti attorney's first offer of a private settlement, the public harm required more than money hidden behind a confidentiality clause. Dante held a second press conference at the brass bar where he had torn away Elena's badge. He stood without the Moretti counsel and read a statement accepting personal responsibility. He did not mention the pressure of the raid, Malcolm's deception, or the apparent strength of the case. "I was wrong," he said. "My decision endangered an innocent woman and taught every employee watching that rank mattered more than truth. That failure was mine." Elena watched from the back of the room. She believed the apology because it contained no request for forgiveness. The Gaming Commission removed Dante from daily casino management for 6 months while investigators reviewed the Moretti companies. He used the time to dissolve illegal partnerships and sell assets tied to coercive contracts. Men who once obeyed him called the changes weakness. Dante accepted the loss. Elena formed Ruiz Service Integrity, an independent firm that trained hotels and casinos to protect frontline workers, preserve analog transaction trails, and report threats outside compromised chains of command. Her first clients came from servers who had watched the gala. Her second came from the state. She rebuilt her father's restaurant as the firm's training center. Not with Dante's money, but with damages recovered from Malcolm's trust. The old sign went back above the door. Rosa opened the kitchen once a week to feed trainees and claimed the new chairs were too expensive. Elena laughed more during those months, though the scar on her upper arm tightened whenever a black vehicle stopped too close. Dante visited the training center only when invited. He never arrived with armed men. At first, they discussed federal testimony and employee restitution. Later, they shared coffee after Rosa went home. Attraction had existed between them before trust, but neither confused the two again. Dante learned that Elena loved old Bolero records, hated expensive sparkling water, and kept every thank you note from employees in a flour tin. Elena learned that Dante restored broken watches because his father had never taught him how to repair anything that could not be threatened. He did not ask her to return to the Belladonna. He asked Ruiz Service Integrity to audit it under a contract Elena's own attorney wrote. The agreement gave her unrestricted access, authority to stop operations, and protection from removal without approval by an independent employee council. When Dante saw the clause allowing Elena to shut the entire casino, he signed without changing a word. 6 months after the gala, the Belladonna received permission to operate without interim management. The reopening ceremony took place beside the same brass bar. Dante invited Elena onto the stage and presented no uniform, no staff badge, and no symbolic offer of protection. He handed her the executed contract, naming her firm an independent partner and granting workers a permanent voting seat on the casino's safety board. "This place depended on you long before I valued you," he said. "I cannot undo what I did. I can make certain no one here needs my permission to tell the truth again." Elena read every page before she signed. Applause rose from the servers gathered around them. After the room emptied, Dante remained beside the bar while Elena collected her copy. "There is one thing the contract does not cover," he said. "Then it probably costs extra." The corner of his mouth lifted. "Dinner." Elena let the silence stretch. The old Dante would have filled it with certainty. This man waited. "Dinner is not forgiveness," she said. "I know. It is not a promise. I know that too." Elena slipped the contract under her arm. "Tomorrow, at my mother's kitchen. No bodyguards. And you wash the dishes." Dante nodded with the solemnity he once reserved for territory agreements. "Those terms are acceptable." She started toward the door, then returned and kissed him once, softly, because the choice belonged entirely to her. When she pulled away, Dante did not claim a future or ask for more. He simply stood beside her as the casino lights dimmed. Months earlier, Elena had shut down the Belladonna and lost everything because a powerful man believed authority mattered more than the woman serving his table. Now, the casino could not open without the protections she designed, and Dante Moretti no longer offered her a place under his command. He offered an equal seat, accepted her right to leave, and waited until she chose to stay. The following evening, Dante arrived at Rosa's kitchen without a driver and rolled up his sleeves at the sink. Rosa inspected the first plate he washed, returned it without comment, and made him wash it again. Elena sat near the restored register, listening to an old bolero while pretending not to enjoy his discomfort. Halfway through dinner, Dante's phone rang. The Belladonna's new employee representative reported that a wealthy guest had threatened a server after she refused him more alcohol. The floor supervisor had stopped the table, documented the threat, and removed the guest without seeking executive permission. Months earlier, that decision would have endangered the worker's job. Now, the system protected her before Dante even heard her name. He thanked the representative and ended the call. They shut down a profitable table, Elena said. Dante placed the phone face down. Then they did their job. She recognized the answer as the final proof of change. Not a speech, not a contract. A loss of money accepted without resentment because a worker's judgment mattered. Rosa started another record and pushed Dante toward the center of the empty dining room. "If you are going to stand beside my daughter," she said, "learn not to step on her feet." Elena offered him her hand. Dante waited until she closed the distance. They moved slowly between the tables her father had once lost and she had reclaimed. Outside, the Belladonna's lights burned across the desert. But neither of them needed to rule the room. When the song ended, Elena chose the next one, and Dante stayed beside her, listening before he moved.